Okay, I should press continue, I guess. Okay. So we're going to give everyone a chance to join in. Thank you for all of you joining us. We're going to have quite a few hundred on this special celebration. Hopefully you'll find it enjoyable and reflect on why it's worth a celebration and what we have to be thankful for. So I'll give the participant numbers are still climbing, so we'll give another just a few seconds. Okay. Okay, well, still just zooming. So I'm gonna wait about another 30 seconds or so, and we'll start.
Well, it's 100 degrees here.
Yeah, it's heat index about 105 where I'm at. And
my allergies.
It's really good to know, John. Thanks for sharing your.
Well, in case I lose my voice, I just want to let you know why.
Okay, thanks for sharing your medical condition with us.
Well, I have a lot of medical conditions to share anytime you want.
Okay, just as long as you don't have anything else you need to medical-wise you need to bring up. Okay, I want to start first by thanking everyone for joining us, and it's a pleasure to share a few moments with you and celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Community Services Block Grant, and we have a lot to celebrate. I'm joined today by John Drew, who is the CEO of ABCD in Boston. John has been in the program since 1965, and someone who's been through many, many battles that we've had over the years on behalf of this program. And ABCD has a special place in my heart. It's an agency that I'm deeply involved with, and certainly to me epitomizes all the greatness of the Community Action Network. We're also joined by Katherine Resendez, who is our sign language interpreter. And that was a suggestion made from the network on the last webinar that we did, workshop that we did. Great suggestion, so we're always going to include that. And then Tara Clark is on, and she's sort of handling all the sort of the back end stuff, back room stuff, to make sure that we're able to present this in the way that we have planned. So again, thanks for giving me a few minutes to share with you the 40th anniversary of the Community Services Block Grant. So Tara, with that, I'd like to show our video.
The President of the United States. This administration today, here and now, declares unconditional war on poverty in America. Today I took a trip which should be unnecessary. I took a trip which in our time should become impossible. We have declared unconditional war on poverty.
South Bend, Indiana. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Martinsburg, West Virginia.
So please, for God's sakes, try to, the Burlesons and the rest of them that run off, tell them they can vote against me the rest of the year, but don't vote on that one thing where the Republicans are going to brad my nose, because this is one I just can't lose. This is the only Johnson proposal I've got.
And I said, this is the first bill under my own name. Now don't let me down.
So next thing I know, the phone rang, and he was in a hushed voice. He said, Sarge, this is your president speaking. And we're having a meeting with the cabinet. And I've just taken this phone call to give you a call and say that I've thought again about the war against poverty. He said, I've decided you really are the person to get it going. And after you get it going, we can talk about who will be the permanent head of it. But he said, I want you to be the permanent head of it. And he said, I'm going to announce it on the noon broadcast. I'm going to be making it in a few minutes. He said, I hope you understand that this is your president speaking to you.
So is a phrase called maximum feasible participation. Everything I've read is that it was included because of persistence by a couple of individuals, but that it was a very...
One individual in particular, a man named Dick Boone, who some of you know.
That were launched a whole series of community action programs around the country based upon ultimately a kind of a tripartite agreement that one, the public sector locally would be involved, two, the private nonprofit sector would be involved, and that finally the citizens or representatives of citizens would be involved under the maximum feasible participation.
You can have as much participation in this as you want, all right? And you can change your own destiny. And people believe this. People who I had never seen out before, housewives, dragging their kids out to meetings, because they really believed that they were participants in a structure that was going to better their lives.
During the 1960s, the federal government undertook ambitious, sometimes almost utopian commitments in one area of social policy after another, elbowing aside the state and local governments and the private sector, and establishing literally hundreds of new programs based on the assumption that any human problem could be solved simply by throwing enough federal dollars at it.
How much more in budget cuts are you going to have to make over the next couple of years, and will you still be able to balance the budget in '84?
Well, this has always been our goal and will continue to be our goal, but remember that we always said that there were further budget cuts for the coming years.
On this vote, the ayes are 238, the nays are 195, and under the rules...
The Senate voted overwhelmingly in favor of his economic package.
Mr. President, congratulations. You're a tough adversary. No hard feelings, old pal. It's a great two-party system we have. We gave our best, and you outdid us. As a matter of fact, you stunned us. I never figured you could beat us that badly.
But when we can find systems that do work, we want to come out and aggressively support them, and that's what this press conference and that's what this initiative is all about. Blasio and I went to Speaker Gingrich several months ago and asked him to support an effort that was being brought forth by a number of Republican members in terms of how we could help further expand successful efforts that are currently taking place across the country in some 98% of our counties in America. This network is known as the Community Action Agency Network and the Community Action Agency System. Speaker Gingrich was very supportive and said he was entirely behind our effort and that we should go out, Rick and I, and attempt to, with the other members, encourage the appropriators to come up with the dollars to allow an expansion of an existing program.
Already we've frozen the salaries of hard-working federal employees for the next 2 years. I propose cuts to things I care deeply about, like community action programs. I recognize that some in this chamber have already proposed deeper cuts, and I'm willing to eliminate whatever we can honestly afford to do without. And tonight I am grateful that this Congress delivered, and pleased to say that the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act is now law.
I want to make some comments on the videos you've just seen, just some brief comments, put it in context. First of all, President Johnson declaring a war on poverty. It was a culmination of a number of beliefs and a number of needs that LBJ personally had. Number one, he grew up in poverty. He worked with low-income students. He saw the impact of poverty on children on the border of Texas and Mexico. So that deeply, deeply touched him. Second, his hero was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And what better way to complete Roosevelt's New Deal than to provide the ultimate relief, the ultimate assistance, the ultimate role of government, and that is to eliminate poverty. It was the only first attempt, and so far the only attempt by any country in the history of the world that sets out to eliminate poverty in its midst. And third, he had a political need. And the need is that he needed an initiative that would differentiate himself from Kennedy. You heard him say to George Mahon, who was chairman of the House of Probes, and Speaker McCormick, that this is the only Johnson bill out there. This is it. Everything else they're seeing as a continuation of President Kennedy's agenda. So Johnson needed this for his own identity, to do something dramatic before the 1964 elections, and he chose that, and all those needs, including appealing to the liberal base, the traditional liberal supporters, interest groups, was of paramount importance for the master politician of the age, and that was LBJ. But the reason we got a war on poverty, and the reason the economic opportunity was passed, was presidential leadership. Without Johnson selling this and working it day and night, it wouldn't have happened. You see him in South Bend and Pittsburgh and elsewhere, Wheeling, West Virginia. Johnson not only visited the country, rallying public support for the war on poverty, but he also tirelessly worked Congress to get this legislation passed. And if you hear the whole series of oral histories of Johnson on the phone talking to members, by the end he's hoarse, barely talk, but right up until the last minute he was working the phones to make sure that the only Johnson initiative would be able to pass. In choosing Shriver, Sarge gave 2 or 3 versions. The interview I did with him, he embellished it quite a bit, but to me that was a logical choice. Sarge says he doesn't know why he was chosen. Well, he was for a lot of reasons. Number one, Johnson liked Shriver. They were close. Johnson really liked Sarge, number one. Number two, he worked with Johnson as vice president, worked with Sergeant Shriver in launching the Peace Corps. And in launching the Peace Corps, Sarge had to sell it. It was a concept. It was an idea. And Sarge had to sell that to Congress. But he did it tirelessly. And Johnson really admired that. Third is that Shriver was a Kennedy in-law, not quite a Kennedy, but a Kennedy in-law, liberal and Catholic, which was important to Johnson looking at the 64 elections. But also I think Johnson realized that, if this flops, if this fails, some of the blame will go off on the Kennedy wing as well, because they had Sarge Shriver involved. So all those combinations, and there were other people competing for that job to be director of OEO, but Sarge, to me, was a logical, brilliant choice by President Johnson. Maximum feasible participation. This program was going to be different. It was always designed to be different, and that even from the New Deal. And that is the grassroots are going to be involved. The people in the community, the people impacted by policies, those that needed the most assistance, that needed hope and opportunity, they're going to be involved in this program. And of course, maximum feasible participation, which, by the way, in our new reauthorization bill comes back, that phrase, maximum feasible participation, became one of the lightning bolts out there that attracted so much controversy as well as so much support. Richard Nixon, the tide is turning. And Nixon, from his acceptance speech in Miami in 1968, the Republican convention, all the way through literally through just a few days before he resigned, Nixon wanted to eliminate this program. Didn't believe that government had a role, And who he was really taking his anger out on was the Community Action Program. Why? Citizen participation, maximum feasible participation, some of the controversies surrounding the Economic Opportunity Act and the Community Action Program. We survived Nixon. Only a few years later, they have President Ronald Reagan, whose history as governor of California was very, very much opposed to the Office of Economic Opportunity, the war on poverty, and particularly the community action agencies. And what drew most of his ire was the fact that community action agencies ran legal services. So Reagan, when he was elected, went out hard after the successor agency of the Office of Economic Opportunity, called the Community Services Administration. But that gave us an opportunity to focus attention on the network. Yeah. And you saw, excuse me, you saw a Reagan at the ranch talking about reconciliation and Bill Natcher in the chair. It was through reconciliation, which you're hearing about now in the Senate budget debate in the House, with only Republicans voting, or only Democrats voting for reconciliation budget in both the Senate and probably in the House as well. But it's through reconciliation that we were able to, after CSA was eliminated in the first budget resolution, we were able to propose a program that didn't save the federal entity. We did not have a base of support in Congress. Liberal Democrats and nearly all Republicans were opposed to that. But we were able to offer a compromise, which was a block grant, a categorical block grant for community action agencies. And you saw two pictures there, Lowell Weicker and Robert Stafford, two moderate Republicans, Weicker of Connecticut, Stafford of Vermont. Both gave me the opportunity to propose a system, legislation, an idea that would keep intact the local network. It wouldn't save the federal entity, federal local, but they would invest time in leadership and a lot of working with their colleagues to try to enact something that kept intact the Community Action Agency network. Originally, when I proposed it, it was the Community Action Block Grant. It was Legislative Council that renamed it to the Community Services Block Grant. But again, two moderate Republicans that went against their party, went against the president, and went against basically the political winds to say, no, we have to do something for our community action agencies. They're heroes. They were awfully important in developing this program. And we saw a press conference that we held in 1996 with Kurt Weldon and Rick Lazio, and there's 9 Republicans went in, and myself, we went in and met with Speaker Gingrich to basically push back on the contract with America. Again, eliminate the program, eliminate CSBG. David Stockman used to say to me that he was Reagan's OMB director. Don't worry, David, if the program is any good, the governors will fund them. These agencies have any value, the governors will fund them. We didn't take that to the bank, and what the Reagan administration proposed was a social services block grant for everything. Jam all the programs in there, cut it, ship it to the states and say we're done with it. Well, contract with America proposed in 1995 and in 1996 proposed eliminating 200 programs. Number one was Community Services Block Grant, but our growing bipartisan support that really began under Weicker and Stafford, particularly for CSBG, and continued to grow. 9 House Republicans. The last member of that 9 in the Congress at all is Richard Burr, the senator from North Carolina. We went in and met with the speaker, and he agreed not only to not eliminate the program, to remove it from the hit list, but also to increase it. So the largest domestic increase percentage-wise was under Newt Gingrich as speaker, $100 million increase. But it's easy to think that the program is always identified as a Democratic program. We've tried to make it a bipartisan program. Both Republicans and Democrats have an opportunity to support us. And sometimes Democratic presidents are not in our corner, do not see the value of the network. And you saw President Obama in the State of the Union in 2011. I was happened to be in the gallery watching, proposed cutting the program. His budget proposed cutting it by 50%. But when he also said, you know, some of you proposed deeper cuts and where we can honestly agree and that we don't need these programs, we can take it even further. What he was saying is, here's a program I won't fight for. Here's a program that I'm willing to eliminate. But it was that bipartisan support, the Obies and the Tom Harkins, but also a coalition of Republicans that stood up and said, no, we need this program. And shortly after, during the Obama administration, we saw $1 billion investment in ARA for the Community Services Block Grant. It happened to be before his State of the Union. It was the only program Obama opposed in ARA, is our $1 billion. But bipartisan members supported funding for the Community Services Block Grant. And since then, we've seen money in the CARES Act, $1 billion for the network. We've seen bipartisan support for reauthorization. We're going to see bipartisan support very, very, very soon, within days, on a major initiative that we've undertaken. We see our budget appropriations continue to grow, greater recognition of the program, and for the first time in a long time, we've seen a president propose increasing the budget. First one, President Biden has proposed increasing CSBG, first president during the life of CSBG, proposes an increase, and first president in a long, long time that has proposed increasing the funding going to community action agencies. So it's been a rich, rich history. Lots of historians view it, the story of community action as ending in 73 or 74. Some think it's 1981, but certainly since the creation of CSBG, the story continues to unfold. The chapters are interesting, and there's many more chapters to come. So at this point, I want to turn to John. John, you've been involved with the Community Action Program for a long time, and since 1965. You run, as I said in the introduction, a terrific agency that is just one of the flagships, one of the ones that we point to that's what community action is all about. What on a 40th anniversary, what's going through your mind?
Well, as I've discussed with you, David, in past, what's going through my mind is how well we did until today. 1965, I was in public housing when my back was broken, 2 children and nothing going. And I was able to get into Head Start with my children. I was able to get help with the education. I was able to get a hand up, and lo and behold, my first client I had when I eventually became an auditor was ABCD. I went and delivered the audit reports, and then I went back in the afternoon and took them back. What happened? ABCD had a start, like all public agencies, like all agencies, wherein the local government at first wanted to run it. And what happened was that because of maximum community participation, it cannot be overstated, by embedding the program directly into every neighborhood. They all had a say. They were on the board, and they threw out City Hall, and they put Bob Court in charge. I was Bob's deputy. We then had a chance as a group to work with our communities. Some people had great skills. Some had come off of welfare, but they were very articulate about their needs. They were embedded. They felt empowered. That was the purpose of the whole thing. They making decisions on budgets. They were making decisions on their neighborhood needs. They were in a big board where they could talk to power with the folks from the banking community. It was so, so important. But what were we doing at the same time? Started legal services for the poor. Started the first federal neighborhood health center in Columbia Point, with the same day opening one in Mississippi. We started the first WIC program out of that Columbia Point Health Center. We started the CDCs. We started, Head Start started in '65. We had all kinds of initiatives that got on the ground as quick as we could because those ideas had been out there before. And because of being able to participate in such a way, we had 5,000 youngsters in summer programs. I mean, it was, you could almost exult at what was happening. I was in the middle of it. I had been a beneficiary. I come out of the docks. My mother's one of 15 kids. And I just felt it in my gut. This is the way it should be. This is what should be happening. And yeah, it was a little messy. When you throw money out and you can get it down, you get it down. A lot of community participation. It wasn't wasted at all. And we found out, by the way, what we got a couple of decades later, a couple of generations later, a lot of Black, brown, woman elected officials came right through that process. They came right through in participation, and they're now leaders in our community. But I was there today when we got a telegram from Howard Phillips, that's Mr. Nixon's deputy, who said, go away, you're done. Right after he won 49 states, when he lost his Massachusetts, I think. And they just said, go away, you're done, done. Shut down labor programs collectively across the country. And that's when that group, at that point, the leadership and CAPS stepped up with the Lawyers for Committed Civil Rights and brought suit in federal court while we were trying to figure out how to stay alive and meet our needs. And people were worried about the jobs, and people were coming in from the government saying, well, you're all done, we're going to take over. A few months down the line, a federal judge in Washington, D.C. said, hey, Mr. Nixon, you cannot impound funds. That's illegal. And that got backed off. So I say to people, what happened? Why didn't they come back? I said, he had something going called Waterhouse. Water, the places where they burgled. And I guess he got caught up in that. So we survived that and we carried forward. We went into Jerry Ford's administration, where guess who was in charge of OEO? Donald Rumsfeld. It was his deputy, Dick Cheney. So, we've been through this all the time, but what's important to say is that we, and I know all the other CAPs that came on the scene up until 1972, and we're very close to the local congressional people, keeping them informed, letting them know how important it was, letting the elders speak up. I can go on. I'm sorry, I don't want to go on because this is a show for you, but from 1963, Kennedy's assassination till 1975, when Jerry Ford put his hand up, this country was in a turmoil. We had a war in Vietnam. We had a major civil rights happening in 1964, 65. The first time since Reconstruction in 1865 on that there was civil rights granted to people. And actually a president of the United States called Johnson, who I think he knew that he was giving away the South by going that way. So all of that was going on, and community action was in the middle of all of that. We had places where people were meeting on legislation, on community action. It was, there was fires and burning. It was a time that you lived through, and the end of it, you say, oh my God. And the end of that period with Jerry Ford was now we slipped into Reagan. But meanwhile, we were still doing things like everybody else. We started with everybody in New England, a heating system program. We started a weatherization program. We started de-leading programs, etc. But then came Reagan, and Reagan with David Stockman, who was a congressman, but a very savvy congressman. He knew the budget backwards and forwards. Remember, up to that time, up to Nixon anyway, the Office of Economic Opportunity was in the White House. It was not a cabinet. And the last thing Nixon wanted, Ford wanted, Reagan wanted, was to have down the hall the Office of Economic Opportunity. They're trying to get rid of us. So Stockman come up with his wonderful, the only problem he did for us is he did it early enough so we could see what was happening. And as David said, it took a lot of guts, a lot of savvy to make it through that. But what he basically said was, I'm pushing off Reagan. I'm pushing off the federal debt, anything having to do with these anti-poverty programs forever. And we will give it to the states, we'll keep 25% of the money, and they can do whatever they want because they know best what will happen for poor people. Well, I don't think that's true. I know it's not true. And, you know, my reflection is that, God, every time it happened, I said, I can't go anyplace. I got to stay here and, you know, help, because there's no, it just basically said community action has to survive. You pull that out of all the communities and what do we got? Nothing. So yes, I exulted with everybody else when the money that was appropriated and went to the community service block grant with the ingeniousness of a 90% pass through to the existing caps. That has been a godsend for these 40 years. David, NCAF was created. We were armed to try to make it to the future and be ready for what was going to come. And I think that's something, a story that just needs to be understood. How often we were pushed back because Mayor Daley of Chicago didn't like the idea of his people getting money he didn't see and other cities. But all being said, that's what's on my mind. And I think about the things that David has said. Since that time, we've been part of CARES, going back to Recovery Act. We've been here for the blizzard of 78. Every time there's something happened, the Community Action Network, and I went around the country for 10 years helping, reacted. We were there. We opened the door. Every time our neighbors needed help, we were there. The Congress knew that. They knew that.
Well, John, before we get to the, before we get to time to celebrate our 50th anniversary, let me circle back on reasons to celebrate. And this would be my list, but I'm anxious for people to chat and tell me other things that you want to add to this list. Number one, first is survival. This program has been written off and counted out for much of its history. By 1966, Johnson had second thoughts on this war on poverty, particularly community action. So it's been written. Survival is one. Number two is a recognition, particularly under CSBG, that the country needs, our communities need a national network. That is important. Three, we produce leaders. John, you talked about the role that community action has played in developing leaders in their community. Some of those leaders end up in Congress. They end up in City Hall, but they're leaders in their community. We played an important role. We're still innovative. We still create. We don't have a federal laboratory currently. That's about to change. But the the Head Start, the weatherization, it's LIHEAP anniversary today. The Job Corps, legal services. We're a laboratory that still exists. Maximum feasible participation, the only program that has the poor really involved with planning, operating, and benefiting is the Community Action Network. And we have bipartisan support. And I think that is really worth celebrating because the political winds, as we know better than anybody, the political winds can change in a second in an election. And it takes both parties feeling welcome and able to support and be appreciative for the support they give. We've achieved that. And that is of, I think, immense consequence going forward, particularly in today's environment. So there's a lot of things that we should celebrate and cause to rejoice. I'm anxious to see what comes in from the network in terms of what you think it's worth celebrating on. I'm going through quickly some of the comments. Leadership is one. Importance in the community. We're that trusted institution. Boy, it's taken a long time to achieve that. Particularly, it's so important now because of so many other institutions that the public does not have trust in. I've had a couple comments on that. Any others I'm looking for? John, any others that you want to add?
I just want to emphasize that with the community service block grant, we not only were able to continue, we in Boston, we started and have wonderfully got a urban college program, a university which nobody in the education system thought could happen. We have worked on a number of projects with and made many partners. I think it's important. We've made many partners outside of the caps that we can work with on food, on homelessness, on all of the issues that we work together with them. And the other thing I would say that the only favor that Reagan and Stockman did to us, they threw us in the state houses. Okay. We hadn't been up to the state house asking for anything much then. We started, and now we're getting state money for a lot of our programs. And in Massachusetts, we got our first money appropriated last year, and then again this year for the Community Action Network. So that's the progress. That shows that we took advantage of being in the state. We just didn't lie back and say, "Oh my God, we're going to be a state actor." We are not. We are a federal actor, a congressional appropriation.
The fact that Congress recognizes the network and invests in it also creates opportunities in the state. It makes it easier if you're in Ohio for the mortgage assistance program. It makes it easier to turn it over to a network to handle. And many other states have during the pandemic, but previous to that as well, receive opportunities from state funding, state partnerships created in part, not only, but in part, because there is a federal recognition of the importance of community services block grant funding community action agencies, and you have a viable network with accountability, results, performance, and that local trust and track record. Very, very important. Well, there are many things to celebrate, and I want to end. We've had a couple of comments. One was that Leahy and Grassley are the only two senators left. Yeah, I think about that a lot. Grassley, when I first met him in 1982, Senator Chuck Grassley's 87, he might be 88 now. I've known him since 81, and Republican senator, conservative from Iowa. My first meeting with him, he said, "I like those community action agencies. They're the best group to keep an eye on welfare cheats." That's where the relationship started. But by 1985, Senator Grassley and Senator Mark Hatfield, another hero, happened to chair the Senate Appropriations Committee, went 40 straight hours during the Senate budget debate to keep CSBG. And it was May 8th, May 9th, May 10th. And finally, Stockman gave in. So yeah, I think about with the passing of, even recently Mike Enzi, but Carl Levin, John Warner, lots of the members that were so important to us in developing this program, that all had a role, all played a part at a critical time in our history. They were there, and it took years to invest and build relationships. We don't have a Kennedy, don't have a Dodd, we don't have a Harkin, but fortunately there are new generation of leaders emerging in Congress. The difference is more Republicans than ever before, lots of Democrats, and the coalition is bigger. The roster is larger to choose from on particular individual fights. Somebody also pointed out that Rogers, Hoyer, Chris Smith, and Don Young are the only 4 members that were there in 1981. So there's always a passing of generations of people who've been so important to your program. Of those 4, perhaps the most important to us on a daily basis, the 4 I mentioned, would be Hal Rogers of Kentucky. But life moves on. New leaders come and new supporters come. They feel welcome. They feel invited. They see the program. They're Democrats and Republicans alike disagree on almost everything in Washington these days, but they do agree that there is a role for an agency in the communities to assist low income, to develop strategies and solutions for conquering poverty and for giving people opportunity and hope. And that happens to be the Community Action Network. I'll leave with just a couple of quick final comments. I think we're on the verge of a great era. I truly do, for community action. Core programs are moving in the right direction. Authorizing is moving in a very robust way, with a recognition that CAPs provide a lot of value, but also they can do even more with greater federal investment, greater federal opportunity. So the lesson to take away of this celebration is that we should be thankful that we have this flexible funding, the Community Services Block Grant. We should be proud, all of us, on the role that we've played, whether it's in our community, in our state, or federally. We should be proud of that. And we should realize that it's taken a lot of leadership, a lot of work to get us to this moment. And a lot of individuals who worked in the program before us put in a lot of effort and a lot of hard work to get us to this moment. We owe it to them, we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to future generations, but we also owe it to our communities to be the best that we can, and we're going to have an opportunity to be even greater than we've been in the past. So everyone, thank you very much for the celebration. Thanks for good work. Stay tuned, and you ain't seen nothing yet. Yeah, good days ahead of us. Thank you very much, and happy 40th anniversary, Community Services Block Grant.